Welcome to the Internet Files. Tonight, we delve into one of history's darkest and most haunting mysteries, the case of Jack the Ripper. In the fog-drenched streets of Whitechapel, London, during the autumn of 1888, a shadow stalked the night. A predator who hunted with precision, cruelty, and a purpose no one could ever truly define. His crimes were so gruesome, so calculated, that they would come to terrify generations to come. Between August and November of that year, 5 women were found brutally murdered, the victims now infamously known as the Canonical Five. Their deaths marked the birth of one of the most chilling legends in criminal history. Who was the man behind the name? What drove him to kill? And why, after more than a century, does his identity remain one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the world? Welcome to the story of Jack the Ripper. The first body was discovered on August 31, 1888. Her name was Mary Ann Nichols. Her throat was savagely cut, her abdomen mutilated, a crime scene so shocking it would signal the beginning of what would soon be called the Whitechapel Nightmare. Found dead on September 8, 1888, the second victim was Annie Chapman, her body discovered in the backyard of a house on Hanbury Street. What the police encountered was a scene of unspeakable horror. Annie had suffered deep, deliberate mutilations to her abdomen, and her internal organs had been removed with chilling precision. It was this disturbing detail, the clean, almost surgical nature of the cuts, that first sparked one of the earliest and most enduring theories in the case, that Jack the Ripper might have been a doctor, or at the very least, someone with medical or anatomical expertise. Whitechapel was now gripped by fear. The killer wasn't just brutal, he was methodical. And he was far from finished. On September 30, 1888, another body was found, Elizabeth Stride, the Ripper's third known victim. But this crime was different. Unlike the others, Elizabeth's body bore no mutilations to the abdomen. Her throat had been violently slashed, but the rest of the gruesome ritual seemed unfinished. This unusual restraint led investigators to a chilling conclusion. Jack the Ripper had likely been interrupted before he could complete his work. That same night, however, the horror would continue, proving that the killer's thirst for blood was far from satisfied. Murdered on that very same night, September 30, 1888, was Catherine Eddowes, the Ripper's fourth victim. If Elizabeth Stride's murder suggested interruption, Catherine's proved that the killer had found another target to finish what he'd started. Her body, discovered in Mitre Square, revealed deep, deliberate mutilations to her face and abdomen, signs of escalating brutality. The grotesque nature of the wounds sent shockwaves through London, igniting fear and outrage. For the first time, the public realized they were facing not just a murderer, but a monster who reveled in cruelty, and who seemed to strike at will, right under the city's dim gaslights. On November 9, 1888, the terror reached its horrifying climax. Mary Jane Kelly, believed to be the Ripper's final canonical victim, was found brutally murdered inside her small room on Miller's Court. What investigators discovered there defied imagination. Mary Jane had been horrifically mutilated, her body almost unrecognizable, the worst scene of all. The walls were splattered with blood, and every inch of the room spoke of unimaginable violence and rage. This final act of savagery marked the end of the Whitechapel murders, but not the end of the mystery. With Mary Jane Kelly's death, Jack the Ripper vanished into the fog, leaving behind only questions, fear, and a legend that would haunt the world forever. To truly grasp the horror that gripped London in 1888, we must walk through the streets where Jack the Ripper hunted, the shadowed corners of Whitechapel, where fear lingered in every alley. Back then, Whitechapel was a place of poverty, darkness, and desperation. The streets were narrow, dimly lit, and often cloaked in thick fog, creating the perfect stage for a killer to move unseen. Amid the noise of factories and the cries of the hungry, life and death coexisted side by side. One of these grim locations was Bucks Row, now known as Durward Street, the site where Mary Ann Nichols, the Ripper's first known victim, was discovered. In 1888, Bucks Row was a bleak, industrial lane, lined with warehouses and shadowed by looming brick buildings. The area was surrounded by slums, home to low-income families, labourers, and the forgotten souls of London's East End. A desolate and silent environment, perfect for an attack to unfold without witness or warning. In 1888, Bucks Row embodied the kind of isolation that invited danger. Shadows seemed to swallow every sound, and the dim gaslight barely pierced the fog. Today, the area, now known as Durward Street, bears little resemblance to its grim past. It has been rebuilt and modernized, with new residential buildings and even a school nearby. The once forgotten alleyways are now well lit and urbanized, pulsing with everyday life. Yet, despite the transformation, traces of history remain. A few of the original brick structures still stand, silent witnesses to the horror that once gripped this corner of Whitechapel, reminders that beneath the city's modern face, the echoes of the Ripper's terror still linger. 29 Hanbury Street, the site of Annie Chapman's brutal murder, once stood in the heart of a densely populated and impoverished part of Whitechapel. In 1888, Hanbury Street was lined with crowded tenement houses, each divided into cramped apartments that offered little privacy and even less security. Number 29 itself was a humble dwelling, tucked away in a narrow passage, accessible to anyone who wandered by. There were no gates, no locks strong enough to keep out danger, the perfect place for the Ripper to strike unseen. Today, the original building no longer exists. The site has been transformed, now surrounded by modern offices, shops, and businesses. Yet, as you walk down Hanbury Street, there are still whispers of the past in the surrounding architecture, faint traces of Victorian London, where shadows once hid one of the most chilling crimes in history. Berner Street, now known as Enriquez Street, was the site where Elizabeth Stride met her tragic end. Unlike the other locations, this street was lively and active, filled with small shops, bars, and a few lodging houses catering to the working-class residents of Whitechapel. On that fateful night of September 30, 1888, Elizabeth's body was discovered in the courtyard of the International Working Men's Educational Club, a place known for its political debates and social gatherings. Ironically, amid the voices of activism and reform, a scene of unspeakable violence unfolded. Many believe the Ripper was interrupted here, forced to flee before finishing his brutal ritual. Today, Enriquez Street has changed dramatically. The site of the old club has been replaced by modern residential buildings, yet the street's original layout remains. Some of the aged brick walls and narrow alleys have survived time's passage, preserving the haunting atmosphere of the East End, a reminder of the night when terror silenced the noise of Berner Street. Mitre Square, the site of Catherine Eddowes' brutal murder, was once a small and isolated courtyard, hidden away in the labyrinth of the City of London. In 1888, it was cobblestoned and dimly lit, surrounded by warehouses and office buildings that stood silent after dark, the perfect setting for a killer to strike without a sound. In the early hours of September 30, 1888, Catherine's mutilated body was found here, her final moments lost to the shadows of Mitre Square. The faint glow of a gas lamp revealed the gruesome scene, a chilling testament to how easily the Ripper moved through London's fog without leaving a trace. Today, Mitre Square looks very different. It has been transformed into a modern commercial space, lined with glass-fronted offices and renovated architecture. Yet, despite its new face, the layout of the old square remains partially intact, subtle traces of the past still visible beneath the modern facade. The area is now well lit and closely monitored, but for those who know its history, the silence of Mitre Square still carries an unsettling echo of the terror that once walked there. 13 Miller's Court, where Mary Jane Kelly was savagely murdered, was a narrow and claustrophobic passage tucked away at the end of Dorset Street, a place once infamous as one of the roughest corners of Whitechapel. In 1888, the court was lined with cramped tenement rooms, housing immigrant workers and the poor, a world far removed from the glittering image of Victorian London. With no public lighting and only the faint glow from nearby windows, it was a place where shadows thrived, and where danger could strike unseen. Today, Miller's Court and Dorset Street no longer exist. Both were demolished and replaced by modern commercial and residential buildings. The area, now clean and unrecognizable, has lost the grim atmosphere that once defined it. Yet beneath the polished surface of redevelopment, the ghosts of Miller's Court remain, buried deep within the history of Whitechapel's darkest chapter. Since the investigation first began, theories about Jack the Ripper have multiplied, each one trying to unmask the phantom who haunted London's nights. Over the years, investigators, historians, and amateur sleuths have dissected every clue, every name, and every shadow in search of the truth. Among the countless speculations, a few theories have stood out. Theory 1. The medical knowledge theory. One of the earliest and most enduring theories suggests that Jack the Ripper possessed medical or anatomical expertise. The precision of the mutilations, the clean incisions, the removal of specific organs, hinted at someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Investigators at the time speculated that the killer might have been a doctor, surgeon, or perhaps a failed medical student, someone accustomed to working with knives and familiar with the human body. Others believed he could have been a frustrated physician, using his gruesome acts as a twisted outlet for anger or revenge. This theory gave rise to one of the most chilling ideas of all, that Jack the Ripper wasn't a deranged madman, but rather an intelligent, methodical killer who operated with the cold precision of a man trained to cut and to kill. Theory 2. The local butcher. Another compelling theory points to a butcher or slaughterhouse worker as the man behind the murders. The killer's ability to perform precise, swift cuts suggested someone accustomed to handling knives daily, with both strength and skill. Whitechapel, in the late 19th century, was home to many meat markets and slaughterhouses, making it entirely plausible that Jack the Ripper could have blended in among them, his blood-stained clothes easily explained by his trade. A local butcher would have had knowledge of anatomy, access to blades, and freedom to move through the streets at night without suspicion, a chillingly perfect disguise for a killer hiding in plain sight. Theory 3. Insanity. Many believe that Jack the Ripper was driven by madness, a man consumed by a severe mental disorder that pushed him to kill with unimaginable cruelty. The sadism and extreme brutality of the attacks suggest more than just intent. They reveal a deeply disturbed mind, possibly tormented by delusions or uncontrollable impulses. Some researchers argue that the murders may have had a ritualistic or compulsive element, each killing serving as a dark release for a twisted obsession. The Ripper, in this view, wasn't acting out of revenge or logic, but out of pure insanity, his crimes the expression of a mind completely fractured and lost to darkness. Theory 4. Royal family. Perhaps the most controversial and debated theory of all suggests that Jack the Ripper was no ordinary man, but rather a figure connected to Britain's elite, possibly even the royal family itself. According to this line of thought, the killings were part of a larger conspiracy, and the government may have orchestrated a cover-up to protect those in positions of power. Some versions point to Prince Albert Victor, Queen Victoria's grandson, while others implicate royal physicians or high-ranking officials, claiming they acted to silence those who threatened to expose scandalous secrets. Though historians remain divided, the idea of a killer hiding behind wealth and privilege has kept this theory alive for generations, a reminder that even the most powerful can have shadows too dark to see. Theory 5. Jane the Ripper. In more recent years, a bold and unsettling theory has emerged. What if Jack the Ripper was actually a woman? Dubbed Jane the Ripper, this theory challenges everything once believed about the case. Supporters suggest that the killer could have been a midwife or a woman familiar with anatomy, someone who could move through the streets without arousing suspicion, even while covered in blood. After all, assisting in childbirth often left women in similar conditions. Others go further, proposing that the murderer might have been a woman driven by hatred or jealousy toward prostitutes, or perhaps a former prostitute herself, seeking revenge against the life she once lived. Though controversial, this theory opens a fascinating possibility, that behind the myth of Jack the Ripper might have stood a woman whose darkness matched, or even surpassed, that of any man. Alongside the countless theories, a long list of suspects has emerged, each one adding new intrigue to the mystery. Over the years, historians, detectives, and amateur investigators have all tried to put a name and a face to Jack the Ripper, yet none have ever been proven beyond doubt. Here are some of the most famous and debated suspects linked to the case, men whose lives, reputations, and secrets became forever entangled with London's most terrifying legend. Suspect number 1, Montague John Druitt. A lawyer and part-time schoolteacher, Montague John Druitt became one of the earliest and most intriguing suspects in the Jack the Ripper case. Known for being intelligent yet emotionally unstable, Druitt's behavior reportedly became increasingly erratic in the months leading up to his death. In December 1888, shortly after the last of the canonical murders, his body was found in the River Thames, an apparent suicide. The timing of his death led some investigators to believe that the Ripper's reign of terror ended because the killer had taken his own life. While no concrete evidence ever tied Druitt directly to the crimes, his mysterious death and troubled background have kept him among the most enduring suspects in the case, a man who might have carried London's darkest secret to his grave. Suspect number 2, Aaron Kosminski. A Polish-born barber living in the heart of Whitechapel, Aaron Kosminski remains one of the most discussed suspects in the Jack the Ripper case. He was a poor immigrant, known locally for his odd behavior and deteriorating mental state, often displaying signs of paranoia and delusion. Shortly after the murders, Kosminski was committed to an asylum, where he spent the rest of his life. Some members of the Metropolitan Police were convinced that he was the real killer, noting that the murders ceased not long after his institutionalization. In recent years, DNA analysis from a shawl allegedly linked to one of the victims reignited the theory, suggesting a possible connection to Kosminski. However, the evidence remains controversial and inconclusive, leaving his guilt forever shrouded in uncertainty, just like the man himself. Suspect number 3, Michael Ostrog. Michael Ostrog was a Russian-born criminal and con artist, whose long record of theft, fraud, and violent behavior quickly drew the attention of investigators during the Ripper inquiry. Described as cunning and unpredictable, Ostrog was known to assume false identities and drift across Europe, leaving a trail of deception behind him. The police considered him a possible suspect largely because of his violent tendencies and unstable behavior, but there was no concrete evidence ever linking him to the Whitechapel murders. In fact, later investigations revealed that Ostrog may not have even been in London at the time of the killings. Though his name remains among the early list of suspects, most historians now agree that Ostrog was a dangerous man, but not Jack the Ripper. Suspect number 4, Sir William Gull. Sir William Gull, a highly respected physician and personal doctor to Queen Victoria, became entangled in the Ripper legend through the royal conspiracy theory, the idea that the murders were part of a plot to protect the monarchy. According to this theory, Gull acted on behalf of the crown, allegedly tasked with silencing women who threatened to expose a royal scandal. His medical background and status within British high society made him a compelling suspect in the eyes of conspiracy theorists. The idea gained traction through books, documentaries, and films, painting Gull as the calculating mind behind the murders. However, no credible evidence has ever supported these claims. Today, most historians regard this theory as fiction inspired by fear and fascination, rather than fact, though it remains one of the most enduring myths surrounding Jack the Ripper. Suspect number 5, James Maybrick. James Maybrick, a wealthy Liverpool cotton merchant, became a suspect more than a century after the Whitechapel murders, when a mysterious diary surfaced in 1992. The diary's author confessed in chilling detail to being Jack the Ripper, describing the crimes and the emotions behind them, and signed the pages with Maybrick's name. The revelation caused a media storm, reigniting worldwide fascination with the case. However, as experts examined the diary, serious doubts emerged. Handwriting inconsistencies, questionable provenance, and the lack of supporting evidence led many to label it a modern forgery. Despite the controversy, The Maybrick Diary remains one of the most intriguing pieces of alleged Ripper evidence ever uncovered, a haunting reminder that, even after more than a century, the truth about Jack the Ripper still slips through history's fingers. Suspect number 6. Mary Piercy. Often linked to the Jane the Ripper theory, Mary Piercy stands out as one of the few female suspects ever seriously considered in the case. In 1890, she was convicted of the brutal murders of her lover's wife and child, a crime so vicious and bloody that it shocked even the most hardened Londoners. Piercy's method of killing was notably violent and frenzied, leading some to wonder whether she might have been capable of the same savagery seen in the Whitechapel murders just 2 years earlier. While there is no direct evidence linking her to Jack the Ripper's crimes, the timing, brutality, and psychological profile have kept her name alive in Ripper lore. To some, she represents the disturbing possibility that the killer who terrorized London's streets might not have been a man at all. Despite countless investigations, endless theories, and a long list of suspects, the true identity of Jack, or perhaps Jane, the Ripper remains one of history's most enduring mysteries. For over a century, historians, detectives, and true crime enthusiasts have tried to piece together the fragments left behind, the blood-stained clues, the witness accounts, the whispers from the dark alleys of Whitechapel. Yet, the fog of 1888 still refuses to lift. Will we ever uncover the truth? Or is the Ripper destined to remain a shadow in history, forever just beyond our reach? Follow the Internet Files for more fascinating stories from the darkest corners of the past. And remember, every mystery has a story, but not always an answer.